Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Frank Quiñegas. I am the ambassador of reading and I am super excited. We're beginning with 2020 and today's video is going to talk about the language of success. And we are going to do another video that talks about the language of success. My focus here is going to be more on speaking a second language. My wife and I got here at the beginning of the early 70s here in the United States. We were kids, we were little babies when we got here. And we didn't know each other, but her family came here and then my family came here and the years went by and we met and we married. But back in the 70s, it was really hard for us because the only language we spoke was Spanish. And back then, everyone here in California, everyone around us, if you went to the store, if you went to the movies, if you went anywhere, everything was in English. And you talk about bullying, back there it was really hard. If you only spoke Spanish, goodness, it was really hard. Even amongst our Spanish-speaking community, there were people that got here before us that were already making the transition into English, and we would get bullied by them also for speaking Spanish. So we grew up as like, oh my goodness, what are we gonna do? And we started learning how to speak English, and things were changing. However, my mother, in her ignorance or in her intelligence, however you want to look at it, I prefer to see it in her intelligence, we would come home and she would say, Spanish, I need you to speak Spanish. You will speak Spanish no matter what. And if she got us speaking English, she would come up to us, didn't I tell you, you gotta speak Spanish? And she was solid in her ways. Well, my wife tells me the same thing about her father and mother. So we grew up learning both English and Spanish. And some of our friends, when they were growing up, they lost their Spanish. Sorry for them. We kept our Spanish. Now, there are people here in California especially that hire nannies that only speak Spanish. How do I know? Because I've met thousands of people. I know thousands of people. And some of those ladies that get hired have told me firsthand, you know why I got the job? And I asked, why did you get the job? Well, because I only speak Spanish. And so when they interviewed me, they had an interpreter and they asked me, do you speak English? And I tell them a little bit. Well, they go, good, because we want you to speak Spanish. And who do you think they are hiring the nanny for? Not for them. They're very successful in what they do. They're hiring the nanny to speak only Spanish for their little ones. So if you speak a second language, it's to your advantage. Those successful people that hire the nannies make sure that the kid is only going to hear Spanish throughout the day. They're out to work, doing whatever they do, and the nanny stays home and Spanish only. Well, the little kid is growing and he's learning how to speak Spanish, and those intelligent, successful English speakers know that at home they have a teacher and a nanny at the same time, and they're going to have an advantage. Well, when the kid grows up, they know how to speak English and they know how to speak Spanish solidly. Why? Because those intelligent parents that are successful make sure that the nanny only spoke Spanish so that the kids would grow up with the Spanish language already. Imagine successful, very successful people hiring nannies that only speak Spanish. Now, to my surprise, and it was a surprise, I'm out there in Mexico, Guadalajara, in Mexico City, León, Guanajuato, and I get to meet a lot of people that are very successful also down in Mexico. And what I discovered is that people that are very successful, that are doing very well, they have their businesses or whatever they do, you know what's happening in Mexico is that there are schools that teach in English, English only. And those parents that are very successful out in Mexico send their kids to schools that teach in English, English only. And I started thinking, here they send them to a school that only teaches in English. They come home, they know the kid is going to watch cartoons in Spanish, the neighborhood is going to speak in Spanish, the household is going to speak in Spanish, but at school for 6 hours, they're learning English. You know what? Common sense. Over here in the United States, especially here in California, very successful people hire nannies. Over there in Mexico, because they speak Spanish, they're not going to get a nanny that speaks English, but there are schools that are teaching in English and they want dual languages. They want English and Spanish. Now, there are also people that speak a dialect, and you know, they start fading away and leaving it alone and not making making it part of their lives. And I think that's a take. Here, successful people in Mexico and very successful people here in the United States, they want both languages. And some people move away from it, well, they're gonna lose it. I went out to the city of Mexico to do a seminar, and after the seminar, we went out, we saw the pyramids, we're having a great time, and we went to this one street, beautiful buildings, and there's this lady selling clothing, and there's this one piece of clothing that my wife gets interested in, and she says, do you have it in this color? And the lady says, let me check, and she's going through her garments, and all of a sudden she spoke, but she spoke a dialect, and I looked around and I don't see any movement, I don't see anybody else, and at the corner of my eye I see a little girl just walking away, and I'm like, I don't know. And the little girl that walked away comes back with her father in a bag, and she showed my wife what she wanted to see, and she purchased. And I said, I'm sorry, let me ask you a question. When you did that whatever you said, that sentence, was it for your little girl? She says, yeah, I told her to go get her dad. An advantage. You know, a second language, you're gonna have an advantage. Now, in 1996, when I graduated, I went into this one school, and we're getting ready to be hired. Some new teachers are gonna get hired. I remember I went into a school, and there was another young man sitting next to me, and we're just talking small talk. We're getting ready to get hired, and he tells me, so what school did you go to? And I said, I went to Cal State LA, and my degree is in education. And I said, what about you? And he says, I went to UCLA. And I go, wow, we're so fortunate that our children here in this community get a wonderful young man that graduated from the University of UCLA, and like we're doing small talk, secretary comes on out, and she says, excuse me, who's Frank Iñiguez? And I said, me. She says, okay, you need to fill out an extra form. And I'm like, is everything okay, or what's going on? She says, yeah, the thing is that you speak Spanish, and it shows in your application that you're certified, so we're gonna give you a stipend. And I go, oh, really? So how much is the stipend? And she says, $5,000. I go, I'll fill out the application. So I go over there, fill out my application. I come back, I sit next to the young man. He says, dear Lord, I should have went to Cal State LA. And I'm thinking in my mind, I don't remember if I told him or not. No, you should have learned a second language. And you know, it's an advantage to speak a second language. European countries, they don't speak one or two or three. Some European countries, they speak 5 languages. All the people that see us out there in Europe, congratulations. Thank you for being great role models in speaking more than 2 or 3 languages. Thank you. And so it's about speaking more than one language. This one, we're gonna call it the language of success, though we're gonna make another one that speaks about that topic. This one, it's speaking a second language or a dialect. If you have it, teach it to your children. Now your question might be, hey, wait a minute, Frank, what about your kids? Do they speak Spanish? Definitely yes, they can speak it, they can read it, they can write it. And you know, it was a team effort. My in-laws, my mother-in-law, Paula, and my father-in-law, Don Manuel, they helped me raise my children. My mother-in-law, she's been the best teacher. She was a natural teacher. Everything she fed them, tortillita or soup or whatever, everything was in Spanish. She was teaching them Spanish. So their first language for my 3 children was Spanish. And we understand, my wife's a teacher, I'm a teacher, and we understand the value of speaking a second language. I remember my son Nicholas, he must have been about maybe 3. He comes up to me one day and he says, Dad, I gotta tell you something. You speak English, my mom speaks English, my brother Adam speaks English. How come I don't speak English? And I said, I don't know how I came up with it or why I even said it. I said, don't worry about it, kid. I think everybody speaks English at around 4. He goes, 4, okay, I'm almost 4. And I said, cool. Now, I remember we sent him over to Anna Being Arnold. It's a preschool next to the university. And he remembered when he turned 4, he comes up to me and he says, Dad, guess what? I'm 4. And I go, yeah? He says, I can speak English. And I go, wow, you remembered. All my 3 children can speak Spanish and English. They can speak Spanish, they can read it and write it. So it's a big advantage for them. My son, now he's in the workforce. You know, he has an advantage for speaking Spanish. He's out there, and many times the foreman will come up and say, hey, Frank, come here, go tell that guy. Why does he tell him? Because he speaks English and Spanish. Now, if you live here in the United States and you speak another language, speak it to your children. Whatever language it is, speak it to them. Only your language, speak it to them. I guarantee you, both my wife and I are teachers, I guarantee you your children will be very fluent in English. There's not going to be a problem. They go to school, as soon as they start school, everything's in English. Their friends speak English. They're out in the yard, they're out in the whatever, in the classroom, everything's in English. So they will get English no matter what. But your language, they're not going to get it unless you guarantee that they're going to get it. Remember, successful people here hire nannies so they can teach their children in Spanish. And out in Mexico, they send their successful people out in Mexico, they send their children to schools that teach only in English. Let's learn from those successful people. Let's get a second language, a dialect. Keep your dialect. It's an advantage. I already told you the story about the little girl. Now, I know some of you have complimented my shirts. The guy that sells me my shirts, and I don't want to offend him. I know he watches my videos. I think he's Arabic. And when he met me, he spoke to me in Spanish. He goes, hey, primo, which means cousin. He says, ven, primo. And then we started talking. It turns out he speaks Spanish fluently. And not only does he speak it, he understands the culture of it. He speaks English fluently, and he speaks his language fluently. Wow, what an advantage. Plus, he has the language of business. He knows how to make business. He has business all over the place. And you think Spanish helps him? English helps him? His language helps him? Of course it's going to help him. So it's to your advantage if you know a language you're taking from your own children if you don't teach it to them. You're going to give them a gift. You're going to give them an inheritance if you teach it to them. I know Felix, my nephew that started this whole channel deal, he has two kids, but Noah, we hang around with Noah, and I noticed that he speaks Spanish to him. And I go, hey, mijo, do you always speak Spanish? He goes, sometimes a little bit of English, but mostly Spanish. He's already given him an advantage, because he can teach him in English only, and he's going to grow up and he's not going to know Spanish, and that's cool. We live in the United States. He's going to learn English, but how about Spanish, and giving him the gift that he already has? Very well, we're going to leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you loved it so much that you shared with your loved ones. If you have family members that are already taking from their own children, not teaching them the language from home, show it to them. Let them know that we have an advantage. Whatever language it is, teach it to them. I think it makes us very unique, very special to know more than one. You know, one more thing before we close it off. We are the only channel, and that's pretty challenging to say, we are the only channel that does a topic in Spanish and then turns around and does it in English fluently from the same person. There are many out there that speak English and then they get a second voice to say it in Spanish, or they get the writing in Spanish, but they don't have it fluently. Here, if you liked it in Spanish, you can go, hey, look at this video in Spanish fluently. Or if they watch it in Spanish, they go, hey, look at this video in English fluently. We are the only channel. That's pretty daring to say. We've looked it up. We haven't found anybody else that's doing it. If you know of anybody else, let us know. Send a comment. I'll respond to your comment, and I'll be grateful for your comment. How's that? Very well, we're going to leave it at that. We're going to wrap it up. Till next time, your friend, the ambassador of reading, Frank Iñiguez, wishing you well today and always, knowing that you will find and get what you are looking for. Gracias y felicidades por haberte quedado hasta el final. Si quieres más información, hay muchos videos que puedes ver. También recuerda, si no eres parte del canal, suscríbete y ponle la campanita para que te recuerde cada vez que salga un video. Los martes salen en español. Gracias y bienvenido.